moving on to these theories, and I want you all to pipe in on your thoughts about these. The very first theory is that there are no ghosts or any supernatural activity at all going on in the film, and it is only Jack's inner demons and psychosis that are causing everything.
That's what I inferred from the film entirely from the first time I've watched it.
Then how do you explain the black guy's involvement in the story then?
Well, I'm going to break all this down because this is actually interesting that the person who broke all this down, there's a documentary called Room 237 where a lot of these got introduced and people have went since then and just ran with them.
Oh my God. It's like every theory, isn't it, in that film? Or that documentary, I should say.
Yeah. So the first one is that Dick Halloran is a terrible psychic, and if you watch the movie, he only gets 2 out of 9 predictions right in the film, and one of them that he gets wrong is his own death. Like if he was actually a true psychic, he would have realized that Jack was there or his presence was there, and he would have avoided getting killed instantly by that.
Yeah, that's what I said when he went into the thing. He was like, "Is anybody here?" And I was like, "Shouldn't he know?"
I got to refute that because, like, anytime you watch psychics try to predict the future, it doesn't show you guaranteed outcomes. It shows you probabilities more than anything. So,
but there's more than that. Like the only 2 things that he gets right in the movie is that he calls Danny Doc, and he even says that he used the excuse that he heard him saying that, which he may or may not have. Where what we're being fed in the movie is up to the viewer to decide. And the other thing he gets is he asks him if he would like ice cream. Now, how common is it to ask a kid if he likes ice cream that he's going to say yes?
Yes, so exactly.
So the kid heard that in his head when he asked him if he wanted ice cream then?
Well, is he actually, that's the thing that they get into, is that actually happening? Because all you see, Danny's just staring into the camera, or past the camera. He's not actually acknowledging that he's even hearing Dick at all. He doesn't respond back. In the Shining miniseries, he talks to Dick and his, they talk back and forth. Kubrick cut that out for this specific purpose. You only see Dick kind of looking, at Danny in that scene. He is saying, the stuff, in the, that you hear, and then Danny's just kind of like, staring off in the distance. Like he's not really acknowledging
there's also
that
too,
he can hear it.
There's a ton of the framing already set up where his parents didn't like him leaning into that side of himself. So is he trying to suppress it, and that's why he doesn't get used as much?
Yeah, but I don't know. We can go down a rabbit hole, because if you're going to talk about that, we could talk about how young he is of a psychic, and the fact that even if he's not answering Doc, his mind would be telling Doc what's going on. And he completely almost shuts that off too, because Doc still has to kind of dig a little deeper.
Well, and I'm going to throw that out there too, that there's another thing, whenever Dick, if Dick can read his mind, he actually has to ask Danny what type of ice cream he would like to have. Like, why can't he figure that out? Like, like, would you like chocolate ice cream, Doc? Like, why can't he figure that out from reading his mind?
You know what would be funny is if while Dick and the mom, Wendy, are having this conversation in the pantry, because he's kind of showing her, I don't know, there's a few things here and there. The kid, he didn't really hear him say that. It's just the kid just heard what he wanted to hear. Hey, man, you want some ice cream? And there's like a serious conversation going on in the background. And we're meant to think, oh, wow, he heard his mind. Nah, that kid just wanted ice cream.
And there's the other thought, too, is that maybe Danny he's not a psychic, but he's just a really intuitive kid.
Like there's always that.
Read people. Like, the scene where he's asking about 237 whenever, Halloran is explaining the shine, he basically, there's no hint given in that scene that he got that from Dick's mind. It was just maybe he something about that room, and whenever he mentions it and he sees, Dick Halloran's like response, like in his face, he reads into that, and that's kind of where he goes from there.
Was there anything about Room 237 prior to that scene? Because I was like, was that just something the kid came up with?
It's not shown in the movie.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
Okay. I thought I was going crazy. I was like, fuck, I missed something.
But there's also the fact that, and I'll get into this especially with the Wendy theory, that whole scene with Dick and Danny and Wendy in that pantry, we're getting fed a load of horse shit anyways from like the movie's perspective, and I'll get into why, but there's a lot of cuts in that scene that Kubrick if depending upon whether you believe that he was a genius and put him in there for that reason, or if he was just a shitty director and missed the continuity errors in his movie, they're in there, and I'll get into them. But they kind of make you think, well, is this shit really happening, or is this like, you know, somebody imagining this? Like I said, Danny really never gives any indication in the movie that he truly has any psychic abilities. Like even the whole scene where he's supposedly calling Dick, he's not doing anything. Dick's kind of staring off at, you know, and imagining the stuff that's going on in the hotel. But the Kubrick completely cuts out anything like, you know, relating that the two are communicating for that particular reason. The scene where Wendy sees skeletons and the bear man / old man sex scene come after major trauma and isolation herself, and with other indicators in the film leading up to that questioning her mental state, those could all been her breakdown at that point, and what you're seeing is like her psychosis. So you can't really rely on that as a sign that there's ghosts in the hotel. It's never actually shown who let Jack out of the pantry. And in the scene where he's pleading and promising he will do better, the theory is that the person who let him out was actually Danny, because the way he worded that specifically worded in that scene, he's like, I will do better this time. I'll make up for my mistakes. It's almost like he's telling his son, I know I messed up, but I'll do better, son. Let me out, you know?
We're stretching. We're making giant.
Here's the thing. And I'm going to throw this out there to you. The editor of the film actually responded back to this video I watched on YouTube, and he said that the person who came up with this whole theory was actually really spot on with how Kubrick viewed it, because Kubrick filmed a scene where Grady let Jack out of that pantry, and then in the editing process decided to cut it because he said that it gave too much sway to the supernatural side. He wanted it to be vague on who actually opened the door.
I mean, you infer it based off the conversation, but that's just the conversation could be in Jack's head.
There's that other part of it. Or it wasn't occurring at all, and it was in somebody else's mind, which we'll get to with Wendy's theory. We can never actually trust anything that Jack sees when it comes to the ballroom singer or Lloyd the bartender. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a lot of continuity errors at this point to kind of make you, suspect or try to, critique what you're actually seeing. The previous caretaker, Ullman, mentions as being Charles Grady, and the fact that he had a daughter or two daughters who were 8 and 10. The ones we see in the movie, the guy's name is Delbert Grady, meaning the name is totally messed up, and his daughters are twins. So that right there is like a huge break between the beginning of the movie and the end, meaning that somebody's fucking this up in their own mind and creating these things.
Which is funny because isn't in real life, weren't the actresses that played the twins, weren't they actually like 8 and 10? They weren't the same age.
They probably were, but they were made to look alike.
Yeah, they were made to look like twins.
The other thing that this theory posits is that when Jack is telling Lloyd he never hurt Danny, he goes on to say that it's been 3 years since he does admit it. He changes his tone, but then he said it's been 3 years ago. But if you go back and watch the beginning of the movie, Wendy is telling the doctor that it's only been 5 months since Jack, had his last drink, and that's whenever he dislocated Danny's arm. So one of the two of them is lying. It was either 3 years ago or it was 5 months ago. But regardless, there's another unreliable narrator that we have in the movie. There's a big break in continuity. So a lot of the theory behind the Jack is just going crazy is the fact that it uses the continuity errors to make you wonder if he's, anything that you're seeing supernatural is actually happening on screen, or as if that's like, Jack imagining the stuff happening or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, because it's just enough vague stuff going on, and there's enough stuff going on in the background around those scenes to make you question what you're seeing is being told to you in the right way. So I'm going to let Noah comment on this before we move on to the next part of this, because I think you'll agree with the next part, but it sounds like you don't agree with there's no supernatural stuff.
I think there is supernatural stuff, but I think it's the supernatural with them being psychic sensitive or whatnot. I think there's I know you're pointing out inconsistencies and stuff like that, but I think it's legit. I don't think his son let him out of that pantry room or not. I don't believe that. I think the ghost actually let him out of it and stuff like that. Because So then who grabbed him in room 237 and ripped his shirt? Danny's shirt.
There's other theories about that too.
We're going to get into that theory. That's a dark theory, a bad one too. And it plays in the Jack as a psycho, but I didn't include it in that because I want it to be broken out into its own thing, and it's bad.
I'm the one who when I first watched the film as a young child, I always thought that it wasn't supernatural. These were characters that he created in his head. But to be fair to what my husband's theory is I never was able to explain, okay, well then how did the pantry get opened? I didn't put any deep thought into any other theories. That wasn't a thing for me back then. I was just like, I think he's just crazy and he's imagining these things, and then never really kind of put thought into, okay, well, how did this happen? How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah.
The thing that goes along with this theory that I've got to throw out there because it plays such a huge part in all of this is the mirror theory. And it's the only time that you see reality in the movie is whenever Jack is looking into a mirror, including the scene where he looks straight at the camera, breaking the fourth wall, and then brings Lloyd into it. For a second, it's, he, before his delusion kicks in and he sees Lloyd, the bartender, it's like he's looking to a mirror back into his own self, and then goes into, and there's several other scenes in the movie, like the scene where Wendy walks in with the breakfast, and Jack has that horrible scene where he basically gives her that look like, yeah, you're going to teach me how to write a novel, I'm sure, like that whole, the way he interacts with her, which Nicholson's acting is superb in all those scenes. But it's filmed from the mirror when you're seeing it, and mirrors play. And every time that he walks past the mirror on the way to the ballroom before he sees the scene with them dancing and stuff, he freaks out and spasms every time that he walks past the mirror. So it's like, and one more thing, Miss Massey, whenever he's making out with her, she's a beautiful woman. When he looks in the mirror, she's this old hag. So like the mirror is the truth. Is basically the theory behind a lot of this stuff. Like what you're seeing otherwise is the psychosis, and it's only when he has to reflect upon his own, like in the mirror, is the only part where he's actually seeing himself, which is an interesting theory on top of all that.
See, I had a different theory. My theory was that he also has The Shining too, so he's super receptive to what's going on in the hotel.
And that would make sense. He would be sensitive to any spirits that would be in the hotel. That would make sense.
Yeah, and he's already unstable.
I will agree with you. It actually, in the novel, that's what King hints at, and he brings it up again in Dr. Sleep. Like, Jack Torrance did have the shine. It wasn't as strong as Danny's, but he had it. And like I said, the only reason it didn't work for so many years is because he was an alcoholic, and that's what actually in Dr. Sleep, when we get into that's how Danny tamps his down, is because he becomes an alcoholic and a drug user, and that's what it cuts the shine out basically. So you're right. I mean, you're right, but I mean, is that Kubrick's interpretation? Because like I said, he hated the supernatural element of it from what most people talked about. So
yeah, but it's hard. But you can't get away from it. That's the thing. Is like. He would have had to make a totally different movie. And
I think that,
and
I said,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, because even though Stanley Kubrick changed a lot of the dynamics of the movie, he still played in the sandbox of the actual initial thought. So he didn't really get out of it. I mean, he tried to do it, but he didn't do a good job of breaking away from it. If that's what he was trying to do.
Well, it's brought back in a roundabout sense in the Wendy theory, so we'll see if
there's multiple theories. So you got to buckle up because these are just all kinds of crazy theories that fans and skeptics and everyone have come up with to try to explain not only primarily the movie but also the book too.
Bunch of crazy people.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but it's kind of cool to kind of go through because we can go through this movie, but most people, unless you're living under a rock, most people either have seen The Shining or know what The Shining is and know about it in one form of media or the other. So rather than us just going through the basics of, this is the film we watch and this happened and this happened and this happened, we're like, okay, let's go through all the fucking crazy shit that people have come up with.
See, it'd been one thing if you dropped a twist at the end, right where Jack was getting close to dying, that all of a sudden the reality was it was a lot of him causing it, but you never got that. You never got a reveal that indicated it still kept true to the whole idea.
Well, this was Stanley Kubrick's vision of it too. and Stephen King had his own vision as well, which is why Stephen King didn't like Stanley Kubrick's way of it. I mean, I don't know.
And
We gotta go into all of it though.
This leads into the next theory, because it could be that Kubrick is leaving the supernatural in there because human beings use the supernatural to excuse their own dark tendencies.
Yeah.
Because the next theory is the film is just as an allegory about human violence and how it's a vicious, unending cycle. And that's made, the references that people use in this is all the references in the movie to the violence against or from white settlers against Native Americans. There's numerous Native American or Indian type relics in the hotel. At one point, Ullman even mentions it was built on a Indian burial ground.
Yeah,
which is kind of
they had to throw that in there.
Yeah. It's there's not only is there the references to the whites versus the natives, there's also numerous references to the number 42, which is on Danny's jersey, and there's several other parts in the film where it pops up. And a lot of people say that the fact that Jack uses like a German typewriter that was specifically made apparent in the movie to kind of hint that there was a representation of Nazis in the Holocaust. And
yeah, but then you'd have to. But hold on. You'd have to know that about the typewriter. I didn't know that about the typewriter.
Well, see, that's the thing. But that's the thing about inferences is that they're put there, but majority of people won't notice.
What do the Germans have to do with with Indians?
No, it's not about that. It's showing the different ways that human beings have been like evil against each other. In addition to the fact that Jack is being evil or is being an abuser of his wife and his son, which is a whole other like microcosm, violence or whatever of man against man. It throws in these other references on top of it.
Yeah, but then but that doesn't hold up through generations by that examination for the fact that your understanding of what makes you more and why you are the way you are gets better and better as humans progress. So if you were to look at humans from 40 years ago, think about how over the top violent a lot of parents were.
Well, yeah. And didn't he mention something when he was talking in the bar about his kid, how much he loves his kid and how he wouldn't hurt him, but he had a breakdown, if you will, and he's trying to be a better person. And then at some point he says, white man's burden.
Yeah, you mentioned the white man's burden, which ties into the Native American reference.
And and Kubrick, the thing about it is that Kubrick is notorious for doing this in almost all of his films. Either that or people are like, okay, is he hiding this stuff intentionally, or is this just stuff that we're finding that just like ties in really well?
You know what it is? It's like the most weird conspiracy section is what it is. We're taking nuances and drawing conclusions.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But I don't know if it is, because you got to remember you're viewing this from your own point of view,
100%,
and you're more optimistic about it. You got to take like Kubrick from all intents and purposes, like from his movies, he was a very cynical man. So like maybe he didn't come from the view that human beings were getting better about their violence. They were just it was a different the violence kept perpetuating, but in different ways and in different areas. So like, you got to go with the director a little bit in the fact of what he was trying to convey versus what, the viewer sees in it, too, is kind of the, the thoughts that some of these people have. Like one of the things like that's not made apparent, like the paintings in the movie all have symbolism, like in different ways. Like there's a painting that ties into the Nazi thing a little bit. That's in the background at Torrance's home that shows these two naked children next to a fire, and it's called After the Bath. And that particular painting was used in another film called Ararat, which is about the Turkish Armenian genocide. And a lot of people point that up as another hint that, it was about genocide and, like human nature, about perpetuating this throughout time. And, like he specifically threw that painting in there in the background of the Torrance's home, and you wouldn't pick up on it unless you were like really delving into it that way.
Yeah.
The fact that a lot of the history of violence or the cycle of violence is brought up in the movie. The fact that there's the mentions of child abuse from Wendy and Danny's attack in room 237, which is heavily hinted that Jack was the one that did that. Before the whole theory about the crazy woman did it and all that sort of thing. The fact that Kubrick altered the ending where Jack burns, or instead of burning down the hotel like he did in the book, he basically just freezes to death, but the hotel's left there to linger and claim more victims, which is more representative of the the violence will continue, just with the different person.
I'm hold on. Let me. I almost took it from the position that the hotel needs to claim lives.
Yes,
is how I took it.
Well, in the King novel, it does because it feeds off of them, and they get into that Dr. Sleep about there's these creatures that feed on psychic energy, and that's what it's doing. And even Grady himself could have been, or his twins could have, probably the twins were probably psychic, and that's what manifested the ghost during his time period. But Kubrick is, like I said, there's no real sense that he goes that direction. And even the Gradys and their violence that they had just maybe like a half decade before the Torrances moved into the hotel shows that whole familial violence coming back again. It was cycled back into the rotation, so that kind of plays into all this.
And exactly 10 years later, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it was a 10-year window between the two situations.
Now, if we're going to go along with the darker theories, the Jack is a psycho and this whole, abuse, violence type situation, we've got to bring up the fact that Danny Torrance, there's a theory out there that he was sexually molested by Jack during the movie. And this one's complicated, so I'll go through this, and even with that, it's going to be hard without seeing it. The YouTube video I'll link to has got a better representation.
Yeah.
But basically, the scene where Danny first talks to Tony in the Torrance's bathroom is followed by a scene where a physician is asking Danny about his mental state. In this scene, Danny looks to be covering his genitals. When he's asked about Tony, he says it's a voice that lives inside his mouth but disappears into his stomach. And we'll get into how sick that is later if the theory is true.
Yeah, but he's there in his undies, and the physician's talking to him. So I think, if anything, he's being more like a boy and just covering your junk. Like I think
he could be, but
think about
okay. These are just theories. No, Let's go through them.
I know, but I'm playing devil's advocate to the other side. That if you're a young boy and you get a stranger, even if it's a doctor sitting over you, even when I was a kid, even now, if I take my son to the hospital and they're doing a checkup, like a physical, and they're having him grab his balls and have him cough, even then he gets a little like.
Oh, he will suck his balls back into his body and hide them.
Yeah, but if you're a young boy, because I remember going to get sports physicals, I wasn't really sold on what doctor was touching my balls at the time. And like the last thing I want to do is leave them on display. Even if I was standing there, I remember being there in my tidy whities and my hands would be over my sack area. So I just understanding how a young boy is, that's how you are. You're not trying to put him in display at that time. You're not really throwing out the vibe to the doctor.
Well, that and it's a film, and they probably couldn't show his testes.
But even
they don't want to.
A young boy's not going to be out in the open like, whatever, take a gander. He's just going to be like, I don't know.
Complete opposite of how they are at home. It is balls all over the place. Well, when they're younger.
But even then, like when Benny gets to the shower, he like covers up and
I'm aware.
To his room. So
he's older now.
During this scene, while he's filming this, he's laying on like this stuffed bear, like a Pooh Bear.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that ties in later to the scene with the man in the bear suit, and we'll get, obviously
that was creepy. I don't know what the hell that was about.
Well, that's what
he's trying to get to.
Threw it in there. So Wendy and Danny leave Danny's room at this point after the doctor does, and there's a sticker on the wall or on the door or whatever it is that was originally there of Dopey from Disney Snow White, which is actually referenced several times in the King novel, which is kind of interesting that Kubrick threw that reference in there. But whenever they leave, Dopey is missing from the wall, and some people are saying that might be like Kubrick's way of hinting at lost innocence at that point for Danny, because he's went through, like, he's this trauma he's kind of relived that from Jack. So, and the inconsistency plays in there a bit, like we said before. Jack is shown, and this is interesting. Jack is actually shown to be reading a play girl, not a play boy, but a play girl, whenever Ullman walks up to ask him on a tour of the hotel. The interesting thing that people have noticed about this is, and why would Kubrick make it a play girl? Just first of all,
see, I didn't even notice that.
You're not supposed to.
The specific issue has on the cover of it an article about parents and incest. That's in that actual Playgirl issue that he is holding. People have researched this and found this. Jack and Danny seen in the bedroom of the hotel. Jack is seen leering like a predatory wolf as he beckons Danny into the room, which matches perfectly the hand movements of Miss Massey whenever she sees Jack later, as she's kind of beckoning to him. The scene ends abruptly with no final resolution. It's a quick cut. So the theory is that maybe the stuff that we see shortly thereafter is not actually happening in reality, but in but the 237 stuff is actually is like the way of Jack's mind of covering up all this stuff, like his way of not seeing what he's doing to his son. Danny is seen outside room 237 with a key in the door handle, which goes against as another knock against the supernatural, because why the fuck would a ghost need a key, first of all? But some people say that's because Danny got the key and opened up the room. But I say again, if she wanted him in there, she could have opened up the door. You see the tennis ball rolling out to Danny. Now, if you watch the pattern on the carpet at this point in the movie, it makes like this kind of like a pathway for the ball to come rolling at him. When it cuts quickly behind him and he stands up, and when it cuts back, that pathway is gone and it's behind him at that point. So there's another continuity error or some kind of way of symbolizing that what we're seeing is maybe not what's really going on. Whenever Danny whenever we see the door to the room open, it doesn't actually show Danny doing it. It's just kind of at his height, and it cuts quickly to superimpose Wendy on the scene, and it shows a scene of her in the basement, and in the background there is actually graphic pornography all over the wall that she doesn't even notice. So it kind of
hold on. What part was that?
It's when Wendy's doing laundry. Danny's getting ready to walk into the bedroom. Wendy's doing laundry, and then shortly after that, she hears Jack screaming. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's right after
he starts screaming because he's sleeping on his desk. So she runs. She's doing laundry. All of a sudden, she hears "oh!" and she runs to go see what's going on.
But in that scene, like behind her, while she's doing the laundry or whatever she's doing, there is like pornography all over the wall. And
I didn't even notice that, and I forgot I had seen that in that YouTube video.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
And that kind of hints toward the sexual nature of something going on that she's not aware of. She is not seeing the sexual stuff that's going on. That's the other symbolism. It's there, but she's not seeing it. The door to the room. Let's see, I've got that part. So Danny, whenever he's later seen with the marks upon his neck and Wendy's accusing Jack of doing it, Jack, if you watch that scene, acts like he's dazed, as if he was caught in a bad dream. Like he has no idea what's like even going on. Like even Nicholson's like acting, he's just kind of like fuzzy or whatever. It's that, when Jack later enters room 237, which had two doors, which symbolizes that it's one of the larger rooms on that floor, and probably a honeymoon suite, which means it's a place for fucking, obviously. He sees when he goes in there, he sees a sexy woman get out of the tub. There's a pattern on the rug in front of her tub that looks exactly like the top of the mirror in the bedroom. You can go back and watch this, but it's the actual same design as the mirror that's in the bedroom scene between him and Danny. And whenever she begins to kiss and whenever he begins to kiss and grope the woman, and he looks in the mirror, which could be the mirror in the bedroom, that's whenever he gets horrified and disgusted at what he's doing, and he backs off, which could be a scene of him realizing that he's in the process of molesting Danny at that point. It's the theory. Later, when Wendy is seeing the ghost in the hotel, she sees someone in a bear suit. Remember, Danny was lying on a bear whenever he's being examined by the doctor, giving oral sex to an older man. And that could be the moment whenever Wendy realizes in her own way of what actually happened there, because she was going by, Danny's comment that there was some woman there. Danny could have been lying to protect his dad because he loved his dad and didn't want to, say anything. And that's when Wendy finally woke up to what might've been happening with the symbolism there in that scene. And the really dark theory is that Tony could be the name for Jack's penis, basically. Whenever he talks about how it was lived in his mouth and it disappeared into his stomach, that's the most horrible thing to think of in this movie, but that's what the theory kind of puts out there.
Well, there's the theory about the kid in the room, like just shaking and everything when it shows, I forget which scene where it was. I don't know if it's Jack in room 237 dealing with Miss Massey.
Yes.
And it just it keeps cutting back and he's drooling, but
he's drooling, yeah.
But there's talk about whether or not that's drool coming out of his mouth or not.
What the hell?
Dead serious.
These are
Yeah.
I can get behind the idea of what people are trying to say, but them are some stretches, man. Like, because at the same time, I think he has more of a psychic connection because all the psychic activities building to where Jack Nicholson's at, and then that it's so much it actually reaches out to the black dude that's in Florida, and that's because at the same time that's what stirs him awake.
If you believe that theory, but that's what I'm saying. Like the theory is that
There's
like the whole
there's all kinds of
thing-
theories.
So what's I know, but the other guy that has a Shining. So what? Everything that he did was off intuition. So he flew all the way from Florida to go back to the hotel off of intuition.
Well, here's the thing. Now, if you were like, say you met this family and you were an intuitive person and you met, being the way he was, you met Jack Nicholson's character. And there's also, I got to throw this out there first because I just remembered it. There's a scene whenever Jack's going through the hotel and there's like some female guests that go through there and he kind of gives like a leer after him. So that kind of shows that he's like, a very, like very sexual person. Like he's, like that's on his mind constantly. But anyways,
yeah, but that doesn't get portrayed in the movie very much. Like you don't get the notion that Jack Nicholson is a very sexual predator. I don't know. I didn't. That vibe never got conveyed tangibly to me.
There's a couple different scenes in the movie where there's a scene where he looks in at Danny's bedroom and he kind of like ogles the bed, like then it kind of, and Kubrick holds on that scene for just a split second. The scene where he kind of like, looks after the women, the fact he's reading the Playgirl for whatever fucking reason. I mean, there's the pornography and there's a lot of sexual stuff that's in the background that's in the background, for Kubrick's sake. But as far as Dick Halloran goes, so you're this guy who's pretty intuitive. You meet Jack Torrance, the way he is whenever he first enters the hotel. You meet this little boy Danny who seems to be, I would mention he looks like he's on the spectrum. He looks like he's autistic. And Wendy, and you've worked at this hotel, honestly, that where a guy's already killed his family. Now there's a big winter storm that's just hit. You've already got concerns about this guy anyways, possibly, if you're that intuitive. Most people would try to check up on him and try to see what they can come up with. And a lot of people hold to that scene where he's calling the guy up, that runs like the little, gas station / garage or whatever that gets that, snowcat from. He even mentions, he's like, well, we got a bunch of assholes here and they're not going to work out. I mean, that kind of play, if you go away from the supernatural element, that makes sense, because if you were somebody who'd been in a situation like that or knew of it previously and your hackles were up anyways because you kind of felt like this guy was kind of shady, you would want to be checking in to see that something weird ain't going on with this bunch. So you can explain away the supernatural in that way. I'm not saying, like I said, King obviously went a totally different direction, and you hear, Danny in the miniseries, he actually yells Dick's name, and Dick, like every time that Dick hears his name mentioned, it's like he jumps or whatever to signify he hears him. Kubrick plays it completely different. He just kind of stares at the TV. So, leaving that vagueness about all of it.
And you got to remember, movies everywhere, films, every single film, someone is going to be looking into theories about, oh, this is why this person did. And no one from the film is ever going to confirm or deny, because whatever kind of press they can get on it, they're probably likely going to take it, unless it's something completely like, oh, yeah. I don't know. I feel like Kubrick should have come out and been like, absolutely not. That was not semen coming out of that kid's mouth, or no, that was not the kid giving his dad a blowjob, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Well, the thing too is this. Go ahead, man.
Well, I was going to say the thing too about that is that that's one of the few scenes from King's novel that Kubrick put in the film. Why? That's a good point. Why did he put that specific weird scene that has no connection to anything prior to that? Like, I feel like he put that in there for a reason. Like, he chose that specific because, a lot of the other ghost scenes he kind of changed around from King's novel to kind of fit what he wanted to do. But he left that scene in there in particular.
Oh, God.
Like, I think it was slightly different. The guy had a wolf's mask on or something in the King novel, but he left that in there for that reason, and even changed it to a bear suit.
I'll grant you, it's weird, 100%.
Oh, 100% weird, yeah. So Stephen King was inspired to make this film when he stayed at that famous hotel that's now shut down. It's one of the most haunted hotels in America. I forget what it is.
It was room 217 in the novel. It wasn't 237.
Okay, but so Stephen King was heavily inspired after he had a similar situation. He stayed at a hotel during the winter season while it was shut down because it was in too crazy of an area. And he was inspired to write this book. Joe Hill, blink twice if you need help.
I think he even dedicated the book to Joe Hill. It's a scary thing because he pointed it out. It was like to Joe Hill King, Shine On, because that's where he got the title from.
Aww.
Was from the John Lennon song.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That's kind of scary.
That's my own theory. So sorry, everyone.
But there is some weird stuff, like the whole thing about that guy dressed up like that furry that was servicing the other dude, like at the end. That was.
And an old dude at that. They made a point to show he was an old guy that was getting serviced by that bear.
Yeah,
so.
That was definitely pretty weird.
Okay, the Overlook Hotel was inspired by the Stanley Hotel, which was made by the creator of Stanley Steamers. And it is said that the original Stanley, who did create the steam vacuums, and his wife were friendly ghosts of the hotel. Like his wife was seen like entertaining the hotel guests in her living years, and then after death, she was also seen just kind of dressed immaculately, making sure things were going good, often near the piano in the ballroom, things like that. So interesting story of the Stanley Hotel itself and how haunted it was. But the fact that, it would have, and it's shut down now. It's literally like the Overlook Hotel. It is in a bad area. Not a lot of guests can get to it. It was designed to be put in an area where it's beauty. You go to kind of escape. But during the winter seasons, it's like, you gonna die.
Which they bring up in the Shining novel and miniseries. I mean, because Ullman in that is kind of like he is in the novel. He's a prick basically. And whenever Torrance is bringing up, it's like, why don't you have skiing out here? And he's like, well, we're too far out. That's cost too much. I mean, I think they mentioned that in this version. That's the cost will be too much. But then like Ullman goes on to say that they build it more for the vistic, or the scenic beauty or whatever than they did for like the actual tourism part of it.
Yeah. So, God, there's a website for the Stanley Hotel. I'm wondering if it's actually, I think it's open again.
This next theory you might enjoy, Noah. This one's easily, you can go either way, and I don't really care about this one. I just think it's funny. So Kubrick included references to the conspiracy theory that he was the one that helped fake the moon landing. And the things that he included, supposedly, yeah. So Danny wears a T-shirt with a rocket ship in the movie. There is Tang in the pantry that's very visible that you can see, referencing the drink of the astronauts. Jack Torrance's comments to Wendy as she's trying to defend herself with a bat are to the extent of he was employed to do a very specific job and he can't let his superiors down or they'll make him pay or something thereabouts. There's people that argues that this was a way for Kubrick to reveal the truth through the mirror of film about his involvement with faking the moon landing and to assuage his guilty conscience over the matter. The other argument that could be made is that he knew about that conspiracy theory and he was taking a piss with the people that believed the conspiracy and threw that shit in there just to throw, to kind of edge them a little bit, kind of kind of poke them a little bit about their whole theory.
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever draws attention, why not?
Well, I almost want to watch it now and look for all those little subtle cues.
I was watching last night looking for cues. I'll be honest with you, knowing a lot of the theories that I knew, I was watching it and I was like, I'm not 100% seeing it. Like I even tried. I can in the back of my head, like, yeah, I can see, because you want to keep something like that kind of subtle, specifically with the child abuse. But beyond that, I honestly stuck to my original.
I honestly think child abuse and the cycle of violence stuff is probably got more bearing than any of these other ones, period. I mean, like, you can argue the other ones around those, but the fact that he threw that bear scene in there at the end makes me really think that he doubled back and wanted to hint that, Jack was involved in some pretty shitty stuff with Danny that way. I think that was kind of why that was thrown in there. We're going to get to probably the theory that I thought was interesting, or the most interesting, but it also it incorporates like several others into its theory, is called the Wendy theory. And that's everything that you see that's supernatural or in the movie or that's off about Jack, Danny, and the hotel is actually a delusion created in the mind of a woman who was possibly a paranoid schizophrenic prior to going into extreme isolation and possibly suffered Munchausen by proxy.
I would believe that more than anything.
Hold on. Say that again now. What?
So the theory is
Wendy's
that
schizophrenic.
Everything you see in the movie, the everything you see in the movie that's supernatural paints Jack as a psycho, has Danny as has having the shine, or that the hotel is in any way, shape, or form got spirits, is all the delusional, paranoid, schizophrenic imaginings or hallucinations of a woman who is already crazy before she went to the hotel. And was made worse because she was in isolation, and her husband, even from her husband that she didn't spend a lot of time with.
Yeah, he didn't want nothing to do with her. Crazy bitch.
So the linchpin for this theory was all created around the iconic scene where Wendy asks Jack when she walks up to him and he's on his typewriter and he's typing away, and she asks him how his writing is coming along, and then Nicholson, again, superb acting, flies off the handle and tells her that she should never disturb him while he's trying to work. And goes off the reservation, as it were, tie back to the Indian burial ground stuff. But anyways, so in that scene, the most noticeable continuity error in the movie happens where a chair is behind Jack Nicholson in one scene, and then vanishes again during the conversation, only to reappear. It's not there. It appears and it disappears again. So. And the other thing is, at the end of the scene, Jack, after he's ripped the paper out of the typewriter, his hair's standing up on, in all ends, like, super crazy. Suddenly there's a quick cut. Jack's back at the typewriter. There's a piece of paper back in there that he starts typing on when Wendy leaves. He's got that look about his face, like, what the fuck did just happen? And his hair is perfectly coiffed again. Now, the theory that works backwards from this scene is that Wendy, imagine that entire blow up in her mind. And there's several versions of how this went about. She was either voicing both her and Jack in the scene while Jack was just watching her, like, what the fuck is my wife doing? She was just saying her stuff and responding, or, and acting in response to nothing there. Or the creepiest of all, she just stood there and stared at him while he was looking at her like, what the fuck are you doing? And then she turns around and walks away, and he's like, because that scene, I mean, it fits, because the end of that scene, he gives her that look like, what just happened? And like, she leaves. And the theory goes off the fact that anytime in the movie where you see Kubrick coming from, this big wide angle shot from behind the actors before he comes in, around and actually shows them, is a symbolism of it being in Wendy's mind, and she's imagining this shit. And the continuity errors that are played throughout the entire movie tend to be around, like we said, a lot of the supernatural stuff, but they're also around Wendy. And in particular, that scene, it's like her hallucinating mind is seeing stuff that's not there, and like, and moving it around as she's like having a delusion. And one of the things they point out in this scene is, if you watch previous in the movie, that main lobby area that he's typing in has this big central decoration piece that's like this big wooden piece, and has all these rugs and stuff, and they're completely gone in that scene. They're not there. And even the, and then of course the seat itself, the chair disappears and reappears at various points. Working from that point onward, it's basically saying that if you go back to the beginning of the movie, where Danny is talking to Tony right after Jack calls Wendy, you got to remember there's the scene where Ullman's doing the interview, he mentions all that stuff about Grady and the twin and the girls or whatever, and what happened there to Jack. And Jack makes the comment, well, my wife is a big ghost story / horror movie fan. I'm going to tell her, she might be interested in this. They go, and that might explain later why Charles Grady turned into Delbert Grady, and the twins came out of the 8 and 10-year-olds, is because whenever Jack told her the story, he just told her that there was a guy there named Grady, he had a couple girls that was with him, and they all died. And like her mind that was already predisposed into believing, or she was a big fan of ghost stories and horror films anyways, started working off that delusion, and she started filling in the gaps. And that's why Delbert Grady later on, that whole scene's imagined where Jack is talking to Delbert Grady, because that's in Wendy's mind. She thought the guy's name was Delbert, and that's why it played out that way. There's also the fact that, like, if you see scenes with her in the household, like there's these stacks of books everywhere, like a hoarder, and she's reading a book.
That's in their actual house, right?
Yeah. And she's the one that reads, because she's the one that's seen him reading a book there while Danny's like, eating a PB&J or whatever he's eating in that scene. And she's reading Catcher in the Rye. And a lot of people point out that book is about somebody who suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, which could be a hint from Kubrick that, Wendy might not be all there. She's also the one that tells the lady that Jack, hurt Danny like 5 months ago or whatever. And then Jack later on says it was 3 years ago. Maybe Wendy was the one that was like that Munchausen by proxy stuff. Maybe she was the one, and that's where the theory comes in. When Danny wakes up and he's been, talked to by the doctor, maybe Wendy hurt him in the bathroom at that scene, and whenever he wakes up, he, like she's paying off all what he has to shine. She's making that up or whatever, all this mental stuff, as her way of explaining away the fact that she's actually hurting him for her own, like, attention, as it were.
See, to me, it's almost more tangible that she's the psycho.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's not called hysteria for nothing.
Fits better.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, not that, but she's psycho, and then he drives him to like be crazy, but he's not being crazy because he wants to hurt her. He's being crazy because he wants to protect her kid.
Well, there's that theory, you mentioned about Dick, showing up, he gets called from Danny. Well, the scene right about the point of that where Wendy is talking to Jack and she's blaming him in their bedroom for being the one that hurt Danny or whatever. A lot of people pointed out that there's a lot of continuity errors in that room. There's lamps missing. There's a light fixture that's suddenly there that wasn't there earlier. And that's one of the things that I think goes against the argument that, these continuity errors are like Kubrick being a shit director. Why would he add a light fixture in a scene specifically and then remove it in every other scene? There's something to that.
The only thing I can think of is that because he took so many takes and he wanted the right.
There's only some scenes that had a bunch of takes.
But even if he took a million takes, my argument is like, why would he add that in between one of the takes? Like, it appears out of nowhere. Like, I mean, like it's there for that scene and it's gone. And there's a lot of other scenes around Wendy where light fixture, or like light switches on the wall.
Because you got to remember, as discussed at the beginning of this, Stanley Kubrick is a perfectionist, which is why he does so many takes. So even if he had added those and taken them away, he would have been like, no, I'm not. Whoa. Why was this here and then not there? A lot of the theory is that because he was such a perfectionist, he would have noticed that and he wouldn't have done that without a reason.
But so we have that, they're riding up to the Overlook. Wendy's going on about the Donner Party and all that stuff, and a lot of people make that point of and cannibalism that goes back to human violence and all that stuff. But a lot of people make the comment that that's one of the first signs that Jack is like misogynistic asshole, because he just kind of like plays off Wendy's whole thing, like yeah, he's got that look on his face that Nicholson does so well.
But the thing is too, he's by that era, he wasn't technically. If you were in that era, he wouldn't see me outside the box.
No, not at all.
That's what I'm saying. But if you look at it from modern day, he's like, yeah, he's like, dude, this dude's a little over the top. But in the context of the era he's in, that was probably pretty norm.
Well, but the other argument is too, on the Wendy theory, maybe he was acting flippant to her about all that stuff because he lived with a woman that he'd known for years had like mental issues.
Yeah.
And that was his way of dealing with it. He just kind of had to just let it go. It's like, if I give into this delusion, she's going to go off the rails with it. So that kind of makes sense. There's the fact that whenever they get to the track that you see Danny on throughout most of the movie, where all those scenes are in Wendy's head, because when you watch the beginning of the movie, whenever Jack's reading the Playgirl of all things, the track that's beside of him there, that's assumed to be Danny's because it's got all their luggage beside of it, it's white. But if you watch the rest of the movie, it's red. another little like continuity thing that, like maybe it's in Wendy's mind, like she's changing stuff because, it's just like her, in her delusion, she's just not remembering things exactly the same way. You notice the thing with the light switches being in the wrong place or there and disappeared whenever she throws Jack into the pantry later on. Like there's a light switch that's not there, but it is whenever Dick shows her into the pantry. The whole scene where she's in the pantry with Dick, there's that, arguing that whole thing about Danny and Dick talk. Well, the way that Kubrick filmed that, going from that idea that anytime he feels from behind somebody, that he's kind of showing you like this unreliable narrator, that happens in that scene right before Danny, suddenly supposedly hears Dick say that. And one of the big things is up above them, there's a continuity error where there's these 3 canisters of Kool-Aid that are sitting beside Tang. They were not there prior to that quick cut, that led into all that. And whenever they go to leave the pantry, they disappear again. The interesting thing about that is those Kool-Aid canisters are exactly the same Kool-Aid canisters that are on Wendy's refrigerator at the beginning of the movie.
Oh.
Tying in that, maybe she, is the one that's seeing that, like it all goes back into the Wendy theory of it all. Let's see, there's also the whole thing with people mentioning dissolves and all that. Well, the fact that whenever the 237 scene, the room 237, Danny is sitting outside that room playing. We have, like I already mentioned, the pattern is there one way. It does a quick cut, again, unreliable at that point. Scene behind him goes in, when it switches back to his face, which is the point where Wendy's imagining all these things, the pattern's completely changed. And then Danny makes a comment where he yells out for mom. Now, like a lot of people, might argue, well, he's just calling for mom because, that's the first thing you would think of. You were a kid and you saw something weird like a ball roll up. But the theory is that Wendy was in 237. She was, she was the one that had opened it. She was in there while Danny was playing. And then whenever he yells mom, it's because he knows that she's in the room. And whenever he opens or goes to open the door, they do that quick dissolve where it superimposes Wendy into room 237, hinting that maybe she was the one that choked Danny in that room. Another of that Munchausen by proxy where she's trying to lay all this stuff on Jack that she's actually doing herself in her psychosis, because where that scene changed right before that, you can't really trust that what's happening, or what Danny's seeing is what's really happening. It could be all in Wendy's head.
See, dude, I wish they would have built more context in like, it's hard to say because it's all speculation, because you jump a month into them being there. So there's a month you don't get to see any type of weird interactions or anything. All of a sudden you're a month in, you don't know like what's been happening in the dynamics of everybody's interpersonal relationships, and I'm kind of curious what happened in that initial month build up.
Well, the sperm bank wasn't collecting any sperm. We know that much.
That's true. Here's another creepy thing about the movie that I didn't notice until they pointed out in the Wendy theory. The scene right before Danny goes up to get his fire truck or whatever from Jack, and that has that whole creepy scene we've already talked about with the sexual abuse.
Yeah.
If you look at the TV that Wendy is supposedly watching, it's not plugged in.
Okay.
There's no cord coming out of that TV.
I remember you saying that. However, when I was watching it, I had forgotten that we had discussed this, and I had forgotten that you had sent me that YouTube link. And I was like, where is that TV plugged in at? Because they didn't have long cords.
No, and they didn't. And so that TV's not plugged in anywhere. It's the theory is that Wendy is like basically staring off into nothing, and Danny is watching the snowfall behind the TV, and that he's kind of bored, so that's why he wants his fire truck, and that's why he asked her that. And the whole scene where Jack is in the room with Danny is, of course, when Danny goes up to get the fire truck, you begin Wendy's, hallucinations again. She's imagining what's occurring in that room between the two of them.
Women be crazy. We be creating all kinds of theories in our heads too. So I could totally see that.
I didn't even realize that the TV wasn't plugged in or anything. It's funny you say that, because I'm thinking about it right now. I was like, holy shit.
Well, because you saw where the TV was at, right?
Yeah.
Where like there was a pillar on this side, and nothing on this side if you're facing the TV. So to the right, there was a pillar, but there was no cord going to it. And then to the left, there wasn't anything it could have been plugged in.
No, it was in the far. It was in the middle of the room.
Yeah, there was nowhere unless there was an extension cord underneath a carpet, something like that. But even then, you couldn't see it on the stand that the TV was on. So it was just really weird. It's like, where is this TV plugged in? And ironically, maybe it was in the back of my head because he had sent me a YouTube link. I watched it and it did say that. It was like, hey, by the way, did you notice this TV wasn't plugged in, but they're watching something? And I'm like, oh, okay. Now that I was realizing that during the film, I was like, where is that TV plugged in? And I don't know why I thought about that either.
Well, I'm curious if the outlet was on the floor because some of those buildings have outlets. But even then, I mean, that's all speculation too.
Even the way that they framed it, though, it's one of those TVs that's like on legs.
Yeah.
And you don't see anything coming from behind it at all.
Exactly.
Yeah, but now that you look at it like that, as though he's just sitting there staring at the snow, like playing like this is boring.
Boring as fuck. Yeah, it would make sense.
Yeah, and
well,
that's the
and
way
to
the
be
scene
fair,
plays out perfectly.
To be fair, too, they were watching some boring old black and white film that you and Noah would love, and Benny probably, but I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna go play the fire truck.
Well, maybe, but I mean, like it plays out perfectly to match that theory. And
100%. I think Wendy was a crazy bitch.
Here's the most chilling part of this theory. When Wendy knocks out Jack later on with the bat and he rolls down the steps and she drags him into the pantry, that whole entire scene in the pantry with Jack, and Grady where he's talking through the wall, that's all in Wendy's head. The theory is that when Wendy knocked him out, she drug him straight out into the hedge maze and left his ass out there to die. And that would explain the supernatural elements completely away if that was all in her head and she heard him talking to somebody that wasn't there. There's another continuity error where there's a light switch that's not there on the outside of the pantry door that was whenever Dick showed her into the pantry.
Yeah, I distinctly remember that. Now that you say that.
There's an edit of the scene that's been shown on the internet a few times where Jack's like frozen corpse or whatever, where it zooms out, the snow is almost all the way up to his shoulders. Now, a lot of people argue that and it's cut in closer in the film, so it's not as apparent, but there's no way that snow could have built up that far unless he'd been out there almost all night, way before he ever went out there after chasing them through the hotel and all that other stuff that went on. So the theory is he got dragged directly out into the maze and just left to die because Wendy was just totally off the rails at that point, and she killed the man that she thought was abusing their son, which the whole time was her own abuse. Is the Wendy theory.
That's a good one.
I think if you watch the movie, it fits the best of all.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It's way better because I always thought that there was no ghosts in the film for real and that it was just Jack that was crazy, but then couldn't explain other things. Even with Wendy, okay, say the scene in the pantry did happen. What if it was Jack talking to Wendy saying he was going to change and he's apologizing, and then instead of Grady letting him out the ghost, it was Wendy trying to give him another chance. That's a possibility too. That could be thrown out. Yeah.
Here's the other thing. When she starts freaking out herself, and I mean, regardless of the Wendy theory, she legit goes crazy herself in the movie and starts seeing the skeletons and the bloody, elevator and all that stuff. She is the one that sees the bear suit guy. She's the one that sees that scene.
Yeah.
That scene makes way more context if you go from the idea that she's crazy and she's been imagining this entire time that her son was being, sexually abused by the dad. That plays into that whole theory too and kind of encapsulates it. It was all Wendy imagining that Jack was doing that stuff to his son.
Oh my God.
Did anybody ever ask Stanley Kubrick about any of this stuff?
He won't confirm or deny.
Well, he's dead now.
I don't know if he would even admit it at this point.
Yeah. Well, like Noah said, he is a deceased man.
But I'm going to ask you, does this one fit you a little bit better than some of the other ones? I think it fits way better than the rest of them myself. But
I think her being a psychopath is more tangible.
Wow.
No, I'm serious.
Hit a little close to home, hun. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm serious. If she was dealing with a drunk husband for a lot of years and she just internalized a lot of that shit.
Well, yeah, and he was sober, so...
Well,
he became sober.
That even goes into that scene in the pantry where he's like talking to Grady, because a lot of people point out the fact that Grady has that comment like, your wife got one over on you, Torrance. She's smarter than you are. That's like a wife who's been like having to put up with shit for years, like living through her fantasy in her mind. It's like, I outsmarted you.
I got you, bitch. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I know Jack Nicholson, his character is obviously he plays a really good character, but like when she accuses him of attacking the kid at the hotel, his genuine like, what the fuck? No, I didn't,
Like, I'm sleeping. Let me sleep.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other line. She goes to the say, she changes her tune partway through the movie and says, there's a crazy woman up there that attacked Danny.
Well, she's the crazy woman.
Crazy woman.
Yeah.
She admits it, that she's saying it herself at that point.
I mean, full disclosure, I would totally take a hot steamy bath in that room because that room had a really nice tub, and I am all about those baths. Kid came in there. You know what I'm gonna do? Beat the shit out of my kid because I'm taking a nice hot bath. Quit bothering me, okay?
I just think it fits the best. But moving on to the craziest theory that I read
there's
across,
more?
This one, yeah, this one's even crazier. So the whole dark side of the moon, like syncing up with the Pink Floyd.
Isn't that what you messaged me last night?
Yeah, this one.
I was like, oh, God.
This theory was put on Room 237 and has some validity to it. If you take a version of The Shining that you're playing backwards from the end and you overlay it over top of a movie that's playing from the beginning, there are scenes that actually sync up in their thematic, importance, and actually it to a scary degree. Like they mirror each other, like the scenes.
What kind of engineer do you have to be, a.k.a. Stanley Kubrick, to put that together for it to work out that way? I could see Stanley Kubrick trying to do that based off what type of person he was.
I can imagine it, too. And the guy who pointed out in the video says that, it seems crazy if you were doing it live and it would be impossible. But remember, Kubrick did all those takes so he could manipulate the narrative at the end. And he did all this in the editing room. So
yeah.
This really could be a possibility considering all the amount of takes that he had to go off of, that he could change things enough to where they synced up.
Oh my God.
The strangest example of this goes back to the pedophile thing that we talked about, because the scene where Danny is talking to Tony in the bathroom right before it's hinted that he's been sexually abused syncs up perfectly with a part of the movie where the bear is giving a blowjob to the old man. Like they occur at exactly the same time in the movie if played, like if you play one movie
in reverse,
one backward.
Yeah. Who has this kind of time and what kind of drugs are you on?
He the best. That's all I can say.
I mean, this is definitely like Wizard of Oz and fucking the whole, what album was that?
Dark Side of the Moon.
That's the name of the album. Yeah. Holy shit.
Another example of this is where the Torrances are driving to the hotel and Wendy mentions the Donner Party and cannibalism. And it's the time in the movie where that syncs up is the time in the movie where Jack is breaking through the doors and he says, little pig, let me in, and the cannibalism kind of like, the whole theme about that syncs up between the two of them.
People have too much time on their hands.
I'm just wondering who, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Have you ever watched the Wizard of Oz to Dark Side of the Moon?
Yeah.
Mike played that for me one time, my mom's husband, and it legit goes really fucking well.
The creepiest part is the lunatics on the path, and that's when the scarecrow jumps down off of the, and he jumps onto the yellow brick road. Like that gives me chills every time I see that scene because it syncs up so much.
Well, that's the thing is okay, as crazy as all this shit is, with people who have too much time on their hands, aren't you kind of glad somebody had a bunch of time on their hands? First of all, somebody had so much time on their hands to possibly create this to be that way. There's a possibility that somebody legit did that. And at the end, and say that they didn't, somebody figured out some kind of algorithm where it's like, this fucking works out, and it had nothing to do with it. It's just something in the universe lined up.
Well, that's the thing, though. If you work hard enough, you can eventually draw connections to anything.
100%. That's how women operate on a daily basis. So we're the geniuses, really.
Another example of this in the movie, he goes on a ton of them, but one of them I thought was interesting was that Grady talking about how he took care of his girls and his wife syncs up with Danny seeing the Grady twins as he rides on his bike. Like they're opposite of each other. The funny thing about this though is the guy has this 2-hour video about this.
Oh my god!
Because he took the Room 237 mirror or red room edition is what they call it when you play it backwards.
Oh, okay.
The mirror element.
Oh, that makes sense.
Which if you look at the fact that there's so many mirrors in the movie, the fact that red rum is backwards, I could see Kubrick honestly in the editing room like, fuck, he pops some LSD, let's do it, guys, let's make this bitch work backwards, just like a mirror.
It doesn't not make sense.
This goes even crazier though, because this thing syncs up with like 4 or 5 different things. It's not like just the Wizard of Oz, like Dark Side of the Moon. This syncs up with 3 different old movies. It syncs up with Abbey Road, the album by the Beatles, and he makes a comment that what got him thinking about this whole entire thing was there was several scenes where Wendy, Ullman, Jack, and then that other guy that's like, kind of over the hotel are walking behind each other, and they're walking exactly the same way as the Beatles on the cover of Abbey Road. And like when you play the album Abbey Road, like either frontward or backwards, depending on which way, or whichever way you're playing the movie, if you play the music, there's some element of the music that syncs up to this fucking movie, and the guy has like proof of it, and it's the weirdest fucking thing.
It's just coincidental. So
I agree with you on that. It's fucking crazy as hell.
I want to see that guy's room who drew these conclusions.
Yeah, like he's got like pictures on the wall with string tied to.
Oh my god!
You want to see this video because it goes even more detailed than that. Okay, so 237 appears all throughout the movie. There's like some kind of pattern design on the wall where there's like this diamond pattern behind Jack's head. There's 2 diamonds on one side. It's like 3 diamonds across or something, and there's like. Or half diamonds on the edges, and then there's 7 full diamonds on the inside, meaning 237. There's 23 steps leading down from down into the lobby, and it's got a side stair that's got the other amount, whatever, the 7 or whatever. It's 23 and 7 or something. There's the same pattern that's supposed to be in the maze. Like if you look at the way the maze is set up, there's a 23 and 7 that perfectly mirrors the lobby as far as like its design. Like the guy goes like, I was watching it and I was just like, this guy lost me a long time ago, but this guy is fucking insane that he even went this far into doing this.
You know what's going to happen now is that in over a span of weeks, maybe a few months, I'm going to start seeing how 237 is tied to my husband and his work number and all the things that's affected in his life.
Oh, God, dude.
Yep.
I wish somebody could interview Stanley Kubrick and his response would be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, wasn't he notorious for not confirming things like this?
Well, and if you go the conspiracy theory route that he actually did help fake the moon landing, do you think a guy that was smart enough to be able to pull that shit off would actually admit to anything ever about anything he ever did?
Took that shit to the grave.
See, this is where people would get a little off because the moon landing was filmed in a studio, but it was just to reinterpret what happened on the moon to a degree.
Yeah, somebody was saying that it was live and there was audio, and I'm like, was it live? It made me think, okay, wait a second, we didn't have great,
wireless connection.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense that we wouldn't, but so they filmed it and then replayed it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing throws me about the moon landing. It's the fact that you have the people that say it was all a conspiracy, or you have the people that say that it was that the conspiracy theorists are bullshit. I think they're somewhere in the middle because you take the fact that they would have had to been on a time delay if nothing else, if they even had 100% that technology,
which they didn't.
They're talking to those astronauts like we're on a telephone or something. It's like immediate response. Like that right there shows you that something was up with that whole thing.
If they would just been honest, like we won't know. Like there's no way to like.
Okay, what do you and Avi have to say about the moon landing?
My personal theory
him and Avi are all about fucking conspiracy theories.
I'm all about them too.
They go wild.
I like them, but I like just to entertain them.
Don and I just kind of sit in the background like I like popsicles when they're talking conspiracy theories.
They're like, I like turtles.
I like turtles. Yeah, pretty much.
I think I go the full way on it because like they came out with shit in recent years, like they can't go back to the moon because of the radiation belt and some other stuff and how they lost the technology. Dude, it's not been that long. It's not like you lost like the way the ancient Egyptians lost how to build pyramids. Like that's,
I look at it. All that shit. I look at it from the position of the cost benefit analysis. So if you understand the moon doesn't have a lot of useful material, that we need immediately, then there's not really a big market to go there because it doesn't yield anything.
As Mike would say, if there was big tittied hot vampire women up there, men would have created a way, a direct path to the moon. We'd have the technology by now if for sure we knew there were hot alien life forms up there.
You don't even got to do that. Let's just look at the example what the moon is. So it's a rock. Okay, cool. So if any resource you want to get, you have to extract it. Okay, so if you want to extract resources from the earth, how much equipment does it take? Oh, it takes giant mining equipment and a ton of fuel. Well, then what's the use of going to the moon? That means you'd have to figure out a way to get equipment there, figure out a way to supply the fuel. That means you have to provide air because it's an internal combustion engine. So if you start running down the math analogy, there's no way.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, there's no cost-benefit analysis.
The only way that makes sense is if you build one of those sky elevators they talked about, you know, where you can, get the stuff to the space station and then go from there to mine it or something.
But even then, you'd have to come up with a fuel source that can run in a vacuum. And not only that, but if you understand what happens to any type of bearing in a vacuum, they almost seize immediately. So all bearings have to be sealed. It gets super complex when you understand the dynamics of working in a vacuum. And not that, but the lack of air, something that we take for granted.
Okay, Tech 237.
But it's kind of funny that the movie, I don't know if you all have seen it, the Netflix movie that came out recently called Don't Look Up.
Yes, that was actually hella good.
So if there was
if the
moon had a bunch of like minerals, like, you know, expensive minerals or gold on it, fuck yeah, we'd be on the moon now.
We'd be figuring out, yeah.
You know what's funny is that women,
there's so much truth to that statement.
Women swear up and down, not women, people, spiritual people will say of sorts, will collect. I have my own set of crystals and rocks that I really, really like. One of them I had to not throw out. I put it away. It was actually a piece of meteorite.
It was cursed.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what kind of radiation that thing emits, but those things are kind of hard to hold.
Cosmic horror.
Yes, exactly. So women will collect these, okay? My daughter even has a collection, and she's made, I swear to God, she made this little ritual thing to try to draw Bill Purry back home, our cat, okay? Our daughter is a hidden witch, okay? We don't know. She doesn't get that from my side of the family. But we collect these rocks. Why have women not created the technology to get to the moon? What kind of a stone would you have if you had a piece of the moon, you know?
We have pieces of the moon.
But it's not being sold on the market to women as here. This will help you, it'll align your chakra, you know?
I 100% believe that we went there. I'm pretty confident that we filmed it.
Well, we got Rover up there now and everything.
Well, China's going to the moon, but even then, I think they're doing it just to say we did it.
The Chinese are just going up there with their acrobatics, though. That's how they're getting there. They don't need fuel. They've cracked the code.
No, I think the whole idea of Mars is more tangible as we have a better understanding.
Doesn't Mars actually have life form on there, like water and things like that?
The water's frozen.
Bit, yeah.
It's frozen water. But the thing is, Mars is littered with carbon, which is a prime element we need to actually terraform. Because you can convert carbon into air, oxygen.
Oh, yeah. Clean.
Air.
Yeah, you just have to figure out a way to heat it up. There, I mean, there's all kinds of theories out there about how long it would take and all that, but they've got theories on how to do it.
We'll just move it. We'll just scoot it a little closer to the sun. It'll be totally fine.
I think it's sustainable where it's at. We just got to figure out as technology gets better, we'll be golden.
So what's your all's takeaway after all these theories? My biggest one is that there are continuity errors for sure. I mean, you can't watch this movie after picking it apart and not see them. I think it was intended to kind of make the viewer doubt what they're seeing and like what's being told to them. And the unending violence theme, I could see him easily working that in there, even if you don't work in all the other stuff that people, because they even went so far as to like work in that he's like referencing like Greek myth with like there's like Mount Vesuvius that's like shown in several like background shots, and there's like the whole hedge maze and how he's like superimposed onto a scene with Danny and Wendy like at one point like he's the Minotaur stalking them in the maze, like there's a lot of that going on. So.
Well, I think the fact that Jack Nicholson character is so good, it pulls you into him and you lose all the other small nuances.
Yeah, 100%.
I think you totally lose it for him. Like if you just his facial like reactions like are perfect in this movie.
He looks
like,
crazy from the beginning of the film.
Just everything about his character, what happens, the de-evolution of him and all that. You get so wrapped up in his fall that you can miss all these little other nuances.
Yeah, and Wendy comes off so like sweet and innocent and helpless that you would never think, well, bitches be crazy.
She's a psycho.
And at the
I
end
like
of the day,
that
it's true.
scene.
Women are crazy.
I like that scene where she's got that baseball bat and like he's talking to her and he's like, "Oh, you think we should take him to the doctor?"
Oh,
and like,
that
just
was
the way he
annoying
said
me.
his inflection and the way his facial. I just love it. I love what he done in that movie.
Yeah, that was a good scene because it really made me hate him. I'm like, I will fuck you up with this baseball bat.
Oh, that's what you want to do. You got to drive the emotion.
Yeah.
So it sells.
No, and he's got that. There's no debate on it. My theory totally changed from thinking he was the crazy person. I mean, a woman will drive a man crazy. Let's just put that out there. So I could totally see now because she was annoying in the film too with her all the time and everything. And so I could totally see her fucking getting on his last fucking nerve to where he just fucking blows up.
You know what makes me laugh in the movie is watching her smoke around him all the time.
Oh yeah.
It's like if that's any indication. Yeah, but that's an indication of the era.
Like, 100%. And then offering the doctor cigarettes.
Yeah, but if you understand that, then you should understand the era of which it was in. So like, I don't look at Jack Nicholson's character as so much of a bad guy, other than he's a man of the era. Is more than anything the way I looked at it.
Here's the funny thing that goes along with what you were talking about, the cigarettes. It's there's a meme out there now that somebody talked about, and it's like, I've never been more nervous watching a horror film than watching the ash from Wendy's cigarette when she's talking to the doctor.
Oh shit! Longer and
longer.
Yeah, dude, that part I was like, oh my god.
Which is another sign that she could be fucking crazy because she doesn't tap the cigarette to get the ash out of
completely
it.
Oblivious.
Yeah.
She's just completely oblivious
just
to
holding it. And I don't even remember. I mean, I looked and I could have just missed it. My vision last night was not great, so I probably just missed this. But I never really saw smoke coming off that cigarette very much.
I did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah,
I was having a hard time.
No, it was a lit cigarette.
Okay. I was missing a lot.
My
hearing and my vision was off last night.
Cigarettes will burn. If you light a cigarette and you don't even touch it, it'll burn all the way down.
I know that.
Yeah, so she don't got to hit it. It's just gonna burn out.
So, what's your all's ratings? Who wants to go first on this?
I'll go first. This is a movie that you definitely have to see at least once. If you have not seen this movie, I don't know what you're doing. It's just one of those horror films. Obviously, based off of our conversation, it'll make you think a lot about because I don't know, Reverend, what your perception was, because I know what my husband thought. I had something different that I was thinking. So it's one of those films that'll get you thinking, and it has a few things that will kind of scare you to your core a little bit, depending on what kind of a horror film person. Are you a creeper or a peeper, As in scared to death, we'll ask you. I'm a little bit of both, obviously. Watching this movie again, total snooze fest for me. I mean,
wow.
Even thinking about all the psychology and everything, it's not one of these movies I'm dying to watch again. But it's still a good film, so I'm going to have to go a little more than in the middle. I'm going to have to give it about a 3.5. Is what I would give it on the Rotten Corpses, because while I think it's a snooze fest, I can't deny what went into this film and how good of a film it actually is.
Yeah, I thought it was an amazing piece of art. Like, it had so many things that needed to be there to make it work. From the music to like the jump cuts that actually didn't cut anything, but it alleged on the idea that it might, which sets up later on all like when stuff really starts going off the rail, because you don't know if they're going to cut or not cut or what they're going to show. It leaves a lot of open-endedness for them to really, really pour on the suspense at the very end. It like from start to finish, it was the scene's awesome. The cast was good. All the characters, everything about it, really, everything just works in general. Like it didn't feel like the story was a stretch. It felt like it flowed, like you could see a natural chain of events, like something like this transpiring. So
what would you give out of 5?
A 4 out of 5. A 4.5. Okay.
I'm going to go 5 out of 5 certified fresh on this, and I'll tell you why. This movie used to be a lot lower. I was in Uranus camp. I was about a 3 or 2.5, something like that, years ago, because I there's parts of the miniseries I like better because it sticks closer to the novel. Just for full transparency. that Stephen King novel is one of the few that's actually ever scared me, like reading it. Like whenever I read the way he describes that scene with Miss Massey inside of room 237 is one of the most hair-raising, like, in a book, like descriptions that it actually put me on edge while I was reading it. So I mean, the book is a knockout. And the fact that Kubrick, like, intentionally diverted away from it kind of pissed me off for years. But after going down the rabbit hole with all this stuff and like realizing what Kubrick actually, whether he did it intentionally or whether it was a mistake or whatever, the music alone, the way they worked that into the movie, just I got a lot more appreciation for the artistry that he had in the movie, regardless of I mean, as a scary movie, it does. I mean, it's not. I'm actually more scared still by the miniseries just because I'm more of a supernatural horror person than I am a human horror. Like that's just how I am. And so like just what Urena was talking about earlier with the way that they did the makeup and stuff like that. And that works way, way better for me as far as the horror element. But this movie just hands down has got the artistry that like few films have, honestly. So that's why I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. It earns it just for the artistry alone.
Yeah, the venue, the music, the jumps, the way it transitions, like there's all these things that you subconsciously don't pay attention to, but they build suspense. And then when it gets to the end, you don't know. Like I think they're all critical parts of building the story.
And the unreliable, the continuity errors and stuff that even subconsciously you might be noticing, but you don't realize are there, are making you, kind of guess your own self. And the way he like none of the directions that they go in the hotel, I didn't really get into this, but the way that they have Danny like going in the hotel, like the hotel would not exist the way that it is in the movie, because the way it's cut, it's impossible. Like when he first sees or the Grady twins or whatever, he jumps to another floor like instantly between cuts, like, so even like the layout of what you're seeing before you is like a maze. And in other words, it's like a mirror maze to the one that's the hedge maze at the end. And I think that was intentional on Kubrick's behalf. So I was given over Christmas by Avi, Daphne, whatever she wants to go by, a trivia book. And I read all the ones for The Shining. I was going to put one in here, but we covered every bit of it, so it makes it a little too easy. So I'm going to go with a different winter-themed thing. I'm going with The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. And no, I know you know the answer to this, so don't answer this.
Yeah.
This is for the listeners. The first, I want to go every episode. If you want to join us on Instagram. And what's that Instagram account again, Urena?
It is Death Holler.
Okay.
A Death Holler podcast on Instagram.
Okay, there you go. If you want to go on there, like after you listen to this and kind of post what the answer is, we might give you a shout out on the next episode. We kind of want to work in some listener, feedback and get some listener involvement. But so in the movie The Thing, this is the trivia. Who played the helicopter pilot, R.J. McCready? And that one should be pretty easy for anybody who's a horror film fan, but just throwing it out there is a lead in to some more complicated stuff.
Slap that smoke wagon.
That might have been a hint for you. So you all have any plugs that you want to throw out there for Blue Collar BS?
The usual Blue Collar BS is every Friday night, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Hot Mess Express has been going hot every Wednesday, 7 p.m.
Oh, faux show.
Yeah, for show. We got the Ho Show. Ho for show.
And what was that time again on that?
7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Wednesday. So we have a couple of shows lined up, actually.
I'm going to be doing one with Dr. Death, too. We're going to do a lead paint chips where we do a deep dive into cinema.
And that's not going to be anything like, well, I guess this isn't live, but yeah, that's just going to be recorded in the studio and put out, no specific date frame for that. So the Reverend and my husband will be getting together and having their own little horror show.
It's not a horror show. It's just
not horror show, but deep dive into.
So we do a show on the side called Lead Paint Chips where we do deep dives into a single topic and expand out of them. So this one will be kind of cinema and art and like the cultural impacts kind of thing.
All surrounded by horror.
No, it'll be what?
I thought you said horror.
I think he's just insinuating it's like movies in general and how they kind of represent the public collectiveness. And
I think some movies are more of a driver of the culture than you can realize.
Yeah.
I mean, think about when the movie The Passion of the Christ came out. How many people were like, "Oh my god!" Like I remember that was huge. Like,
oh my God, yeah.
that was massive.
I was like, snooze fest.
Really?
I watched it. I thought it was okay, but it's not a movie. It's not one of those movies. It's an art film, so it's not one of those movies I'll watch again.
Okay.
There's many reasons why I won't watch a movie again. It got to be this extremely amazing film for me to be like, I want to watch this again. Actually, maybe a pretty horrible film.
Let me break your little frame so everybody can get a better context of you. What do you think of the movie Braveheart?
I've never seen it.
Exactly.
Oh
There
my
we go.
God.
Maybe I haven't seen it all the way through.
Hey, what about Rob Roy?
I didn't. Yeah, no.
That's another amazing movie.
Okay, but by whose standards? By yours?
By the consensus of people in general.
Okay, well, I'm not everybody.
Okay, hold on, Dr. Death. What's your view on Braveheart and Rob Roy?
I'm going to throw this out there before you get mad at me. I've not actually seen Rob Roy, but I love Braveheart. So,
what?
See?
Yeah, I know.
You would like Rob Roy. Rob Roy is pretty good. It takes place on the aftermath of the storyline because if you study history, you understand the whole idea of William Wallace is based on a real person and accounts that kind of closely follow history, and Rob Roy kind of falls out in the aftermath of that. After the Scottish get their independence to a degree.
So again, there's a couple. If a movie's just not, if it's artistic film, but it's a good film, I'll watch it and I'll like it, but I won't watch it again. And then if a movie is too goddamn scary, I'll never fucking watch it again.
Okay, what about Last of the Mohicans?
I didn't like it.
Yep.
I did. Yeah, it's one of those films that's like
that is an amazing piece of art.
I get the alleged historical representation and everything that it's supposed to bring.
That one's not based on history. That's just somebody took an idea and
yes, exactly,
and made it.
But they took it off of a piece of history.
Yeah, they did.
100%. And I get what it's supposed to represent. I just wasn't. It's just not my thing.
I think that one might actually be based on a novel, if I remember right.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Well, with that, peace be with you.
And with your spirit. Oh, God. He's like when Kayla screams penis at the end of Hot Mess Express. He's got to throw in his little piece.
That's what you should do. You should take that clip from Beetlejuice when they're dressed up as ghosts and Lydia goes and yanks the sheets off.
Oh, God. When her mom's sleeping with Prince Valium.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I'm hitting the stop
That'd be
record.
hilarious.